Re-
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, yes.
Perfect.
There you are. Hello.
How was your day?
It was all right. How was yours?
Well, I just read Persepolis all day, so
Yeah.
I finished it though.
I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
I was rereading it. I got like almost to the end, but not all the way.
I can't believe you reread it faster than I read it.
hmm
Oh, where did Pappy go?
Beep.
Hi, Pee.
Oh my gosh. Come here. He's really upset because I just got home and I haven't played with him yet.
Aw,
But
poor dang.
I know. How dare I?
Alina wanted to come upstairs with me, and I was like, no, I will not be able to focus with you,
Nope.
whatever
Mm-mm.
you're doing.
No. My goodness. She's crazy.
He's so
Is
cute.
anybody gonna join us, or are we on our own?
It's just us.
Fun,
Yeah.
cute.
I did you get to look at the questions I sent? There's a million.
I just got home like 5 minutes ago, so I've been going over them.
You're fine. I know there's a lot. We don't have to get to everything, but
Everything. It's good
um,
to have a nice list though.
well, Penguin Random House actually had reading guides for both of these, so that was
Really,
helpful. And then
that's
I
awesome.
found some that were targeted towards the format, so that made me
Mhm.
happy.
Hell yeah!
So if you want to get started, we can get started.
I guess we can get started.
Okay. So welcome to RCX Book Club, round one.
Woo!
We will be discussing Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi and a little bit about the book,
Yes.
if you didn't already know. So, Satrapi tells a story of her life in Tehran from ages 6 to 14 and the triumph of the Islamic Revolution, the devastating effects of war with Iraq, and how her childhood is intertwined with the history of her country. And then in book two, she leaves Iran and goes to Austria to attend high school. And after 4 years of sadness, devastation, love,
Yeah.
confusion, like living as an expat, she returns to live with her parents in Iran. So
Mhm.
that's the gist of it. So
Yes.
my first question is, what were your overall thoughts and your rating for this book?
I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was really good. She has a very unique voice, which I think helped because the message and the content of the story is so heavy.
Yeah.
Her comedic timing and the way she portrays the whole story itself makes it feel a lot lighter than it is, which isn't great, but it definitely helps you understand the book a little bit more,
Yeah,
in my
I
opinion.
yeah, I agree. She definitely had a lot of humor. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
I would probably rate it a 5 as well. I usually don't really rate books, especially memoirs, because I don't want to
Mhm.
rate someone else's
Of
experience.
course.
I
Yes.
really appreciated this story, and I think everyone should read it. So
Mhm.
definitely recommend it. And so, did you have any expectations before you read this book about what it would be like? And how did that compare to what it really was for you?
I was expecting it to be a lot darker. I was the way Philip talked about it, I was like, "Oh God, what are we getting ourselves into?" Because he was like, "Ooh."
Yeah,
Um,
it was
but it
scary.
was right? But it, like I said, it was a lot lighter than I thought it would be, and that made the whole thing just 10 times more enjoyable.
I agree. I think sometimes knowing books are in black and white makes it darker in a sense, not just because the art is darker, but it conveys emotions differently. So I was expecting it to be darker, heavier. I mean, it was heavy, but
Yes.
like, I don't know. I guess I wasn't expecting her to have humor, and
Yes.
um, I didn't know anything about her or the Islamic Revolution or really about the war, so I learned a lot.
Definitely. Yeah.
always a good thing to learn something.
Exactly.
Was there anything that you disliked about the book or the format or how she told her story? Anything? I mean, you gave it five, so probably not, but
Yeah, I don't really have any complaints. I really, really enjoyed it. Like, so.
yeah. I mean, again, I can't rate someone else's story and like, I don't like
Exactly.
their story. So
Rate it on like presentation rather than story wise, but I thought it was all very good.
I like that it was broken up in like short little, and
Yes.
how do you say it, vignettes or whatever. Like it was easy to stop after like two stories, put it down, take a break, or something
Yeah.
like that. Which is what I did and why it took me so long to read it.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
okay, and this book is banned. Do you know why it's banned?
I read the author's note in because I have with me the 20th anniversary edition, and she mentions that it's banned for sexual content, which she has yet to understand why. And I thought that was really funny.
Oh, that
In
never
the
came up in
years
my research.
the book has been both beloved and banned. Banned for its sexual scenes. I still don't know where those scenes are. For its torture scenes, because it's acceptable for assault rifles to be illegal in the United States, even if that frequently results in the murder of innocent people. But it's not okay for our reader to see a single drawing documenting the torture of political prisoners. And more recently, because of the Islamophobia.
Yeah,
So,
definitely the Islamophobia. I
mhm.
think when I was doing research on it, the first ban was in Chicago, and it was like an eighth grade classroom or something. And I'm like, this is not age appropriate, which totally fine. And I think they
Yeah,
ended up saying it was okay for 11th grade and above, and 8th through 10th had to like request it or do some special training or something. And I was like, okay, valid
that
if you
makes
want
sense.
eighth graders to read it, but she is a child. And I was like, shunning other children from other children's experiences seems dumb to me.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah, it's pretty dumb that it's banned.
I agree. I agree. I
And then
mean, yeah,
it's banned in Iran as well, because
of course.
of course it is. What were you gonna say? I'm sorry to interrupt
Oh,
you.
I don't remember. I apologize. Let's see.
Okay. Were there any standout scenes or quotes that you highlighted or annotated? I know you like to annotate your books.
Yes, yes. I took pictures because I don't actually own this one yet, and I'm not going to write in a book I don't own. Um,
Your pictures too.
yeah. Let's see here. This one picture right here, she says, I think that I preferred to put myself in serious danger rather than confront my shame at not having become someone, the shame of not having made my parents proud after all the sacrifices they had made for me, the shame of having become a mediocre nihilist. And I thought that was really like,
Real.
yeah, yeah, like to go through all of the things that she went through in her time away from Iran and come back to that afterwards. I can't imagine the shock.
No. The first one I took a picture of was, I think it was her father that said it. In any case, as long as there is oil in the Middle East, we will never have peace. And that
Yes.
to me sums up so much of the conflict that the US has been in over in the Middle East or anywhere really.
Everywhere, yeah.
So that was definitely real. And
Hmm.
then the second one was when her friend's father was killed from the F-14s.
Hmm.
And Marge said, your father acted like a genuine hero. You should be proud of him. And her friend's response was, I wish he were alive and in jail rather than dead and a hero. And I feel like
Yes.
that really spoke to, obviously, these people don't really choose to fight for their country, but they have no choice.
Hmm.
Because I feel like they have to in order to survive. So that was very telling. And yeah, you'd rather have your dad alive than.
And yeah, no, I totally agree.
Which is kind of funny that Marjane would even say that to her because of what happened with her uncle.
Yeah,
So it was an interesting conversation.
it is. Oh, there's so much
There's so
interesting stuff. Yeah.
those were the two that. Oh,
Mhm.
another one. Another quote. When we're afraid, we lose all sense of analysis and reflection. Our fear paralyzes us. Besides, fear has always been the driving force behind all dictators' repression.
Yes.
And that's her talking about
Ouch.
the veil and all kinds of things, but it's just a big wow moment.
Yeah, my goodness.
There's a lot, but those are the only ones I took pictures of, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't
And a
say.
lot of the stuff where her father is explaining to her everything that has happened in Iran in the years that she's been gone and just her reactions to all of that, I felt were very like I I don't know. I really liked them a lot. Because I
And it,
can't imagine how it feels to not only be in that situation, but to have left all of that and gone and experienced your own things and had your own struggles with very little thought of everything that's happening back home.
yeah, she wasn't really staying up to date on what was happening back home because who had the time when she was struggling
Exactly.
with everything else?
Hmm.
But like what you said about her father, I really liked how her parents talked to her in general. Like they didn't baby her, they didn't really shelter her from it when she was very inquisitive and asking questions, and they didn't want to tell her at first when she was really little, but they did, and I was like, we need more of that.
More honesty, not as much hiding.
Yeah, I really liked how they talked to her in general.
Me too.
Okay. So, what have you learned about Iran, and how is Iran's history inextricably entwined with her story?
That's a really good one. Um, I mean, I think I learned a lot. I knew very little,
Me
like
too.
close to nothing about everything that happened then. So I feel like, how do I word it?
I know. I was trying to figure out my answers ahead of time. I was like, I don't know
Yeah.
how to answer this question.
Because I feel like I learned a lot, but it was all so much. That's why I tried to reread all of it because I wanted to get a better understanding of everything. But
I found
yeah.
myself like Googling certain things to get more information. Like I was Googling where the title came from because
Mhm.
that's a city, but it's not where she lived. So why did she call it that? And like Googling in general, like more about the Shah. Is that how you pronounce it? And
Mhm.
she touched on all of it and I learned a lot, but I was just like, I kind of want to know more. And it is so much information.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't think her story would exist without all of those things happening.
Definitely not. No.
Definitely intertwined in her story.
Because she never would have been sent away to Austria or like
No.
half the things her parents did for her.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I want to talk about the graphic format, obviously, because it's a graphic
Mhm.
novel. And the first question is why do you think she chose to tell her story in this format using words and images? And how does a combination make it possible to tell her story in a way that just words would not?
Um, that's a good one. I
Besides,
think
like,
it goes along with like sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, you're
It goes back to the humor of it all. I feel like it, even though it isn't all black and white, and it definitely has like deep, dark vibes, I feel like the pictures and such really lighten it, help lighten the story, just the way she draws herself and others. I think it helps the story come across lighter, easier.
yeah.
Maybe
Without art, you wouldn't be able to see her ridiculous haircuts.
exactly.
Um,
Or her Ridiculous friends.
Hair was the best. I really liked seeing the Karl Marx godlike friend that she had.
Yes.
Weird, and I think with words you wouldn't have gotten the Karl Marx vibes of that.
Oh.
Um, and just in general, the veil and the different styles of veil, and like just seeing it, and like all the bearded men and all of the symbols of that would
Mhm.
have been the same
Yeah.
without. Because her art is very simple. It's not
Mhm.
overly complicated. Lots of shadows.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it fits the story perfectly.
Me too. Me too.
Just her emotion, like the big fat tears and
Hmm.
facial, and you can tell her from all the other characters always,
Always. Yeah.
especially when she gets older and she has the birthmark or whatever she calls it on her face.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So how would you describe the style of her drawings? Like, I'm not an artist, so this might be a
A
hard.
hard one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's black and white.
It's black and white. It's simple, like deceptively simple, I guess. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I think we kind of already covered too, like how the style, how she portrays the story in the very easy, I think it was an easy to understand way, and so the art doesn't take away from that.
Hmm.
Okay. What particular incidents in the story do you think are conveyed more effectively in pictures than they would have been in words alone?
Definitely the different ways you can identify a person and their thoughts religiously or about the war. You wouldn't, through just words, you wouldn't have seen the different styles of veils and the way that men wore their clothes based on whether they were traditional or otherwise.
Yeah, like facial hair, no facial hair,
Hmm. Hmm.
ties. Wasn't the tie a big thing?
The tie is a big thing, yeah.
Definitely the veils, though. Like
Mhm.
seeing them at home versus in public was interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was very, very appreciative of the art.
me too. Me too.
And so we know this is a memoir of her growing up. Do you think if she would have fictionalized the story, it would have been more or less powerful?
I mean, there is so much power in telling your own story. I feel like it would have been less powerful had she fictionalized it or made it seem less than what it was or even more than what it was. To tell a story, even when people write memoirs, they have to, I don't know the correct word, but like jazz it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like everything was very true to her,
A mem
um, her memoir. Yes. So.
So yeah, I think writing a memoir when you're older and trying to remember everything that happened, that's got to be hard, right? Unless you journal
Mhm.
everything.
Every single day, yeah.
But with there being so much trauma involved, I imagine it makes it easier to remember, or you just don't forget it.
Mhm.
I feel like fictionalizing it wouldn't have had the same impact.
No. There's some things that you can only tell personally, I
Yeah.
guess.
And I feel like she was very close to the conflict in the way that, like, it seemed like her family had a lot of moving parts and players in the game. And so like that brought her closer, if that makes any sense.
Yes,
Brought
100%.
her like more involved into the conflict, and then just the fact that her parents were giving her the chance to like make her own way through all of the hardship. Like she wasn't sheltered at all. And
Yeah.
she really understood what was going on. Like from a young age, like she really wanted to make an impact. So
Hmm.
I think I'm just rambling at this point.
Yeah. No, it's good. This is good discussion.
Um,
Um,
anything else to add?
I don't think so.
So, how would you say Persepolis was different or similar to other graphic memoirs you've read? Because I know both of us have read a good deal of graphic
Graphic
memoirs.
memoirs, yeah. Um, it's a good one. I don't read many graphic novels that are in this art style.
Did you
Um, Go ahead, sorry.
you read Mouse?
I haven't actually.
I
I
feel
need to.
like I would say their art styles are similar. It's black and white and it's about war, so that kind
Yeah.
of makes it similar in more ways than one. Um,
Mhm.
most of the other ones I feel like are in color or just about different parts of people's lives. So it's hard to compare people's experiences when they're so different.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciated how she told her story and how everyone else
Mhm.
could tell their story. So
Yeah. I feel like she approached everything from like a different point of view as well, because there was a sense of like she was saying all of these things and she's portraying all of these things, but there's a level of like removal from it all. A lot of it was said very bluntly, and there wasn't a whole lot of like reaction, I
yeah,
guess. And I I think I appreciated that in a way.
like when
So
she was talking about her when she met her future husband, she was like, "And this is how I met my future husband." Like she
mhm.
foreshadowed that like little pieces like that, like you know what's gonna come or why this part is important.
Mhm.
I like stuff like that. Um,
Exactly.
it's just hard to compare to other graphic memoirs when they're just all so
It's
they're their
unique.
own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. And what traditional novels have you read do you think might be better suited for this graphic format? It doesn't have to be nonfiction, but it could be.
Hmm. Um, that's a really good question.
It's a hard question.
It's a really hard question.
Sometimes when I read something, I'm like, oh, I wish there was pictures.
Hmm.
Like if it involves an artist or something like that, I always want to see the art. But like I
Hmm.
can't think of anything off the top of my head now that I've asked this question.
Hmm. Like
What?
with everybody's upset about the adaptation of The Picture of Dorian Gray because they made them siblings, even though it's all like queer subtext. I feel like that would make a really great graphic novel. Just the process of the painting aging, well, Dorian doesn't, um, and all of that. I feel like that, like you said, books that involve more art and expression like that.
Any kind of visuals
Hmm.
that I wish existed. Photographs. I always want to see them, and why can't you show me what you're
Come on,
talking?
exactly. Hmm. Want to see?
But like some books, like I don't know how you would draw them. So
Exactly.
there's definitely a good amount. Like maybe you shouldn't adapt that.
Yeah. Mhm. The more like graphic ones, or the more like, I don't know, I would not read a graphic novel of like Crime and Punishment. Uh
If
so
it's too like if it's too dialogue heavy or if it's too not dialogue heavy, like you have to have a good medium, I think, of like a narration versus dialogue. And then it has to have some visual element that would make sense. Like just people sitting in a chair talking would be so boring.
yes. Yes.
But I'm glad this one had pictures because it really, really added to the story.
Hmm.
Okay, so moving on to the content of the story, which of course we've touched on some. And this
Hmm.
is a really long question, so bear with me.
Okay.
In Associated Press interview, Satrapi said, The only thing I hope is that people will read my book and see that this abstract thing, this axis of evil, is made up of individuals with lives and hopes. And in her introduction, she explains that she wrote this book to show that Iran is not only a country of fundamentalism, fanaticism, and terrorism. How does Satrapi go about challenging this myth? And how does Persepolis dispel or confirm your views on Iran? Or
Ooh,
in what ways does reading this book deepen your understanding and knowledge of Iran and the current situation in Iraq?
wow. That's a really good question.
Yeah, it's a loaded question.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really have any views on it before reading the book. So it kind of built the foundation for all of my knowledge on that war
It's
and the current situation there.
definitely the foundation because I want to learn more, have a better understanding. And I don't know if it was in the back of the book or if it was on the reading guide that Penguins gave with the book, but there's recommendations of further reading. So definitely adding those to my list.
Definitely, yeah. It's a good first book to read, I feel like, because it
Again,
introduces you to a lot of things that you can then go and discuss yourself.
yeah, in an easy to understand way in my
Mhm.
but I think it humanizes the people, see them, they're not terrorists, they're people living their lives, they're just like us. Um, doesn't matter if they wear a veil, if they don't, what religion they believe in.
We're
And
all
they're
human.
they're
So,
always going to be extremist in any religion, and that's not the whole population.
mhm. Yeah,
I think this did a really good job of showing that.
definitely.
Okay. So Marjane was a reader and she asked a lot of questions. So
Mhm.
how do you think the impact of books and reading helped her and everything going around her? Like, obviously, we're talking about this book teaching us stuff. So I'm glad that she had books to do the same for her.
Mhm. I totally agree. I I think as we said before about her parents being pretty open and honest with her from a very young age, and the fact that she could read and then ask questions about it, I feel like that definitely um, helped her figure out her own way,
Yeah.
and maybe find herself and her way of storytelling in the books that she read. Um, so
I think it would be hard to be a writer if you weren't also a reader.
yes. I read something, it was like C.S. Lewis or someone said, you cannot be a writer without being a reader. And I thought that was very true.
I don't remember what the book was, but she was like, I think it was her uncle was talking about something, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I read that in comic form," and it just made me laugh because for one,
Mhm.
like, she was reading it in a comic format, and the fact that she was reading that type of book at that
Book at
like
such a young age.
way to go because
Yeah.
she wanted to be a prophet and she wanted to like
Yes. She thought she was the prophet.
yeah, she loved her country and wanted to, she was so proud of it and it was just a whole thing. So I'm
Mhm.
glad she had books to like hone that love.
Yeah.
Okay. These questions are complicated. Thanks, Penguin.
Yes.
How did the revolution exert power and influence over so many people, including many educated and middle-class people like her parents? And why did so many people leave after the revolution? Why do you think Marge's parents sent her off to Austria while they stayed? And why didn't they leave as well?
Um, hmm. I mean, obviously, I feel like it's all they sent her off so that she could get away from all of this
Oh,
stuff and maybe experience something normal or to be safe and allow her to keep learning. despite everything, because didn't they closed all like the schools and stuff in
Yep.
Iran.
They're
Um
definitely they definitely closed all the colleges, and then they were closing the regular schools too, I think. So
mhm,
they wanted her to continue her education in a safer place.
mhm,
Um, for them to stay, and she was only 14.
right?
Like, I don't know if that would have happened today necessarily. Um,
No.
maybe in dire situations it would, but
Mhm.
I just can't imagine leaving the country by myself at 14.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the fact that her parents stayed, I feel like that shows that they do honor their country
Mhm.
no matter what is going on. Because not only
Definitely.
did they stay the first time, they stayed the second time.
Mhm. Yeah. Even though they could have left.
Yeah.
But
The
and I
ending
think it's
is really
they
sad.
mentioned it is really sad. I think they also mentioned when she moved and she when she arrived in Austria and she was staying with her mother's friend, there was some notes on like the tension between her mother's friend and her husband and how their roles had changed since moving to Austria and leaving. They found themselves in a very different life and they were very unhappy with that life. Um, so that could be a reason that her parents stayed as well.
Yeah, like
Too.
normally you don't have your same job, your same role because you're new.
Mhm.
So all your experiences and everything is just wiped clean.
Yeah.
Um, she didn't really have that problem because she's only 14 and didn't yet have that experience.
Yes. It's
They,
easier to make a big change like that when you're
yeah,
young.
and they seem to be pretty well off because they had a nice car and like stuff like the influx of the prices didn't seem to bother them as much.
Hmm.
Had access to food, things like that. They always had a shelter to go to during the raid.
Yes.
So they did seem pretty well off, and I can't imagine losing all of that.
Hmm.
So yeah, definitely feel like that played a big role in it. Okay. Give some examples of how the ordinary citizens of Iran enjoyed life despite the oppressive regime. I'm saying that word wrong.
Regime.
Yes, I was like, I'm reading it too literally.
It's all good. Um, they talked a lot about like, still drinking alcohol, still making alcohol, and still partying and having game nights. There was a moment where her mother was putting up curtains so that they could continue doing their nightly chess or all of these things that were illegal.
Yeah.
They just continued doing it.
Watching them like flush everything down the toilet.
Yes.
And then the guy didn't even come in because he paid him off. I was like, oh no. Um, and then like her going to buy tapes on the street cracked me up because they're like wearing trench coats with the
Mhm.
tape decks inside the trench coat, and they're like, which one do you want?
Uh-huh.
And like you couldn't even walk around with a Walkman. Like
Mm-mm.
blew my mind. But the fact that there's still like prohibition, like there were still ways
Yeah.
to go around it, and people still wanted to have those things. Of
You
course,
can't just stop people from having stuff like that. It's impossible.
especially the kids, like they seem to make do with what they had
Mhm.
for sure. The parties, definitely the parties.
Yes. Yes.
But I love the scene of her getting tapes. Like that was like
Yes. Yes.
for me.
Hmm.
So, in what other ways would you say that Marjan was just a normal kid, even though all this was going on?
The way she interacted with other people, I think she was very much a child in the games that she played, talking about like going after her friend with like the knife or the rusty nails in between her fingers.
Yes.
And because her friend's father had orchestrated and murdered a lot of people and
And she
like
could reminisce and like laugh about it later,
yeah.
her friend. So,
Exactly. The
Her
games that she
parents,
played. The
yeah,
whole prophet thing, honestly.
her parents getting her the posters from Spain. Is that where they went?
Mhm. I think
Um,
so.
the Iron
Turkey.
Maiden,
Mhm.
or
The wild.
yeah, and the Michael Jackson pin,
Yes.
little things like that, that she still wanted. And the little footnote when she got the Michael Jackson pen was like, this is while he was still black.
My God.
Yeah, that was funny to me. But she did seem like a normal kid, even considering everything that she was going through. And
Mhm.
I'm glad.
Me too. Me too.
So I really liked her family.
Me
I,
too. Her grandma.
yeah. I'm glad that they were close. And I really like the cover of the soft cover omnibus one because it's got all of them on it. And
Mhm.
how she's like looking up to her uncle because I really think she did look up to him. So I like that cover and how it portrayed their family.
Me too.
Um, how would you describe her family and like how important her parents were to her?
Um, they were very consistent, which is really hard to be when you're in the midst of such a horrible war. I felt like they, I don't know, they
What was
held
important
up a lot.
to them?
Mhm.
What was important to them?
They're, I mean, gosh,
What
keep,
environment do they create for their daughter despite living under this regime and through a brutal war? Like,
yeah,
where do they get their strength from?
I can't even imagine um, being able to uphold all of that and still remain decent parents.
They were great
And
parents.
yeah, like I said earlier, the way they spoke to her, and we discussed the way they didn't really hide anything. Um,
I think the important part was for her to be an independent woman and not have an oppressive life.
yes, and she got that.
Yeah, that's really what they wanted for her. That's why they're like, you need to leave
Hmm.
twice.
Yes.
Can't stay here. So I think everything they did was for her. And she was an only child, and they made a point to like, we don't want you to feel like an only child. And I thought
Hmm.
that was interesting. I mean, we both have siblings, so I don't know what that is like, but I can imagine it can be lonely. But she never felt lonely in that sense because she had her family.
Yeah.
She felt lonely in other ways, but I don't think because of her family, if that makes
No,
sense.
no, she always had her family to fall back on,
Yeah,
which is not something a lot of people have.
exactly. Exactly. What is the role of women in the story? And compare and contrast the various women in her life. So her mom, her grandmother, school teachers, the maid. The
Yes.
story was kind of funny. Her neighbors. The maid story was stood out because of like she was not allowed to see the guy across the street.
Mm-mm.
Um, her
Different social
grandmother
structures.
was a very independent woman because she had lost her husband.
Mhm.
So I think the women were very, very strong and a really
Very.
good model.
Mhm. Definitely. That is something that is so vital for so many people, but really isn't, especially during that time and during that war. And so, yeah.
Can you show the cover of the version you have again? Is it
It is the one, it's when
the two
it's
nuns?
the two nuns. Yeah.
I feel like that was a turning point in her school life.
Hmm.
but they ended up lying to her mom. But she was very outspoken to her elders, which sometimes backfired, but I was really glad she did stand up to them.
Yeah, she got kicked out of like multiple homing situations because she called the nuns a prostitute or she insulted the homeowners.
Or like if they were trying to tell you something about what was going on, she's like, no, you're lying. That's not
Mhm.
real. And she kept it real 100% of the time.
Yeah,
Like
I loved it.
I did too. And I'm glad she had positive role models to like.
Encourage that.
So why does we already know why, but like why does Marjane leave Iran, return, and then leave again? Will she always be a Westerner in Iran, an Iranian in the West?
Um, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I feel it's complicated because she was an outsider. I don't know if she ever felt at home in Austria. And I kind of want to know how the story continues from here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Never get after again, like how her story would differ, her experience in Austria versus her leaving again the second time. Uh,
Hmm.
because I don't think she ever really fit in Austria at all. And it was a very weird time in her life, right? She was like 14 to 18. The boyfriend situation, um, losing her virginity was a big deal.
Hmm.
It's just, I think she lost herself and she needed to find herself again. So she had to go home in order to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
But then, I mean, she definitely came of age pretty quickly and then lost
Yeah.
herself
Hmm.
and then leaving home again. I don't know, because
Maybe
I feel like
state of
you,
mind.
yeah, like we don't know what happened after she left the second time for me to say more than that.
Huh.
Um, just, it just ends, and I want to know. I mean, I guess you could research what her life was like, but the
It's
ending
not
was
as.
sad, yeah, because she never returned home again,
Yeah.
and then she never got to really say goodbye to her grandma.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think a Westerner in Iran, an Iranian in the West sums it up really well because she wasn't ashamed of who she was really, but when she first said it out loud, she was like, wow, that's who I am. But
Mhm.
people didn't understand her because of the misconceptions of Iranians and I don't know, that's a really hard question.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm just rambling again.
Hmm. Hmm.
How would you compare her story to other immigrant memoirs that you've read?
As we've said before, it had a lighter tone and it didn't feel like that kind of memoir, because I feel like most memoirs about immigrants are very harsh
Mhm.
and very upsetting in a way. And this, not that this wasn't upsetting, but um, the way the
It,
humor held up.
it was definitely the humor and the hope of her being able to be her true self.
Hmm.
A lot of the immigrant memoirs I read, they seem to have, I mean, they all seem to leave for very similar reasons. So I would say they're similar in that way. They're fleeing religious persecution or whatever, but that could be said for this.
Yeah.
But again, they were all their own story and
Mhm.
hard to
So you
compare.
can't really compare.
No, it's really hard. How do you think Marjan's experience would have been similar or different if she had gone to a high school in your hometown?
In
So,
Richmond.
so like I know my hometown is very small rural area, and I got out for reasons. And then
Mhm.
you were homeschooled. So I'm curious, I really want to know what you think her experience would have been in that environment.
I That's
Sorry
just
for
a
you on
really hard question. I
you don't
don't
have to answer if you don't want to.
No, no, it's a really interesting question. I'm not sure if it would have been very different. I think like we in the United States didn't have as many strict regimes and not much of anything during this time. So I don't even think that her story would exist if she had come here because it is so far removed
Neither of
from
us were alive during that time. So, but
exactly. So
if it were today, I would love to say that the Islamophobia doesn't exist, but it does.
it still does.
But I would say she would probably fit in and have a good time because of the nostalgia that's happening now. She would
Mhm.
probably love the music and the
The
books that
internet.
have the internet. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. But my hometown is I feel like it was very closed-minded, so that would have been hard for her to adjust
Mhm.
to. And what is unusual about her high school experience? And compare your own high school experience to the one she had. That's the second part of that question, but I try to forget high school, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, and mine was so vastly different because I was homeschooled, so I don't have any like knowledge on public school other than what I've read in books. Um,
So she didn't
I
really hang out with her classmates. She was hanging out with the older crowd, right? Like
mhm.
almost like the misfits is kind of how it felt because of their their hair is what I'm
Their
remembering.
hair and the way she portrayed them,
Yeah,
the
that's
things she
really
spoke about.
what I remember. And I feel like every high school has a group like that that you can fit in.
Mhm.
And I would hope that there would be a group for her. But
Yeah.
my experience, like, I don't remember being clicky like that in high school, but I'm probably jaded and it was there and I just don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Mm.
So, what are the similarities and differences between the little girl in book one and the more mature Marjane in book two? How has she changed? And in what ways have her experiences affected her personality? And how has her personality affected her experiences?
She changes a lot, but I feel like her perspective on things doesn't change. She is still very outspoken and blunt and very, I don't know. She just says things and she doesn't super worry about like the consequences of her actions or what she is saying. And that is true from when she was very small to the end of the book. She never really is afraid of speaking her mind. Um, as for differences, I mean, I guess there's the weight of knowledge
Yeah.
and experience.
I think the more she learned about, well, her time in Austria, right? Like at the end, she was depressed, and that
Mhm.
carried her to her return to Iran. And then she went into another depression later in Iran too, even so much of wanting to kill herself. And so she just didn't see another way to escape that. But in the end, she found a way, like the drugs. Like at first, she didn't want to smoke the weed. Like there was a scene where
Pretended.
I'm not inhaling it. Like she just kept it in her mouth, and then like I'm not
Poked
inhaling.
her eye.
And she smoked weed all the time. So like, I don't know if it was the people she was hanging out with or just her personality or what, but that did change. And then she kind of bounced around a lot because her mom's friend didn't want to keep her. And
Mhm.
being in that school and then living with her friend's mom, she bounced around a lot and then had nowhere to go after that. Thankfully, she was able to return home. Just, she had a lot of hard experiences, and that does shape your personality. Um,
Yeah.
and of course, that makes you mature faster. So
Yes. Yes.
I will say I did like book one better, I think, just because of her being younger and her learning, and I'm learning with her. I think I like
Mhm.
that more. But you have to read them as a complete story. There's no
Yeah.
way to separate the two. Um,
Yeah,
but
I agree.
I don't know if I'm making a point. Again, just rambling.
Yeah, just rambling. I don't think I like one more than the other. I feel like they, like you said, they are a complete story together, and not one is complete without the other.
Yeah.
Um,
And all of
so-
her experiences build on another.
yes, it's very well laid out. So you can see her progress throughout the whole thing.
So what do you think was her big like slip into depression? Like what do you feel like was the overall cause for that? And why did she see no way out?
Um, Definitely it's the drugs, and it's the absolute hopelessness she found herself in, like with being homeless for that period of time and hanging around the wrong people. That's basically a concoction for
Yeah.
being not happy.
I'm
Um,
glad she found her way out. The way she found her way out seemed very interesting. It almost was like the profit part coming back and was like, you
yeah,
yoga and you need to exercise. It was like an infomercial of
yeah.
um I don't know, everyone's like, you should exercise. You don't need antidepressants. Like
Mhm.
I was like, is this really how she's gonna come out of it? And she did.
Good, yeah.
I'm happy for her. I just was like, is this really happening right now?
And while those things definitely do help with everything, there is benefits from medication, even though they didn't work for her.
Yeah, I don't think the doctors and psychiatrists or whoever she was talking to were the right people for her. They
Mhm.
didn't try the right drug. And obviously this was in like 88 or something. Like things have changed, thankfully. So I imagine like the closed-mindedness of those doctors then to mental health and
Mhm.
um yeah, those drugs seem to not help at all.
No, they rarely do.
Like, but when she started getting like was it like yoga and stuff, I was like, oh my God, this is it. What are you doing? But
Um,
her again, her experiences turned her into a stronger person, and they
mhm.
all played a part in the person that she became. So they're just stepping stones,
Yep.
and I'm glad
And
she
what works for one person might not work for another, and I'm glad that she found what
what
worked for her.
exactly. And I'm glad she was willing to share that part of her story too.
Mhm.
So my last question is about the veil, because I feel like that's a huge part of the story is the type
Mhm.
of veil in general. So describe the role of the veil in this story. What
Ooh.
is the religious and social purpose, and how do the women deal with wearing the veil?
I found their little ways of protesting interesting. The like one or two curls coming down, or it being pulled back a little bit more, as a sign of protest.
Well,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
was intrigued by the length of it because like one person was like, "Your veil's not long enough," and she's like, "Okay," and then she did the school project of like what is the perfect outfit to not have men looking at you, I guess. Um,
Mhm.
and it was, I don't know, that was just interesting to me.
Yeah.
Um, but like the art class where they had to figure draw a person fully covered with no shape. I was like, how do you do
I
that?
do that.
But the way that they came together to draw in private was really, really cool to see. Um, and then again, seeing them like in private versus in public and how they didn't have to cover themselves all the time and like that
Mhm.
dynamic. Um, Even the hairstyles, like we can tell what hairstyle you're wearing underneath your veil.
Mhm.
Little things like that.
Yeah, there was one diagram where she showed a bunch of, where is that? Maybe I can show it. The different like hairstyles women wore underneath their veils.
Yeah, I like that part. Like it's a high bun or a low bun, or
Mhm. Mhm.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and the things that it could mean
Hmm.
based on the different shapes.
But I had no idea that hair was such a turn on.
Yeah. Who'd have thunk?
When she was, I loved how outspoken she was about the veil, like her tangent about these guys are wearing tighter pants and I can see everything. And I'm
Mhm.
not supposed to be concerned about that. Like that whole speech. I just love that outburst so much.
Me too. Me too. Yes. Let's see here.
Yes.
See.
The
Can you see?
hairstyle. Yeah. That's
Different hairstyles, yes. And it says with practice, even though they were covered from head to foot, you got to the point where you could guess their shape, the way they wore their hair, and even their political opinions. Obviously, the more a woman showed, the more progressive and modern she was. So,
yeah.
mhm.
It
I
was
feel like that's very interesting.
it was interesting how they used it as like um I'm not thinking of the word right now. I think you said it already though, like making it your own and like rebelling a little bit with like a little bit of this showing or not. Or like it sometimes it was down here.
Hmm.
Just the little rebellions made me happy.
Yeah.
And it
Or like
also
the painted nails.
what?
Or like the painted nails.
Yeah.
That was a whole thing as well.
It just also made me sad thinking about that and then how the women today and from the Taliban in Afghanistan are like completely covered and it just breaks my heart that that's happening.
They can't express themselves.
No, they're taking away every way that people can be unique and
Mm.
just made me sad. There's a lot in this book that reminded me of like present day issues and it makes me sad that history keeps repeating
Yeah, when we're still dealing with all of this,
it.
even so many years later. I think she said something in like the author's note at the beginning about um let's see here. Believing this, I was certain the need for the book would fade over time, that soon enough what I had written about, living through a revolution and a war and growing up under the Islamic Republic of Iran's dictatorship, would feel like ancient history. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Um,
Yep.
it's probably become even more important
I
as
think,
time has gone on.
yeah, because I think originally this book was published in like 2000
Hmm.
and
And it
right?
was published in the US, the translated version, in 2003, right after 9/11.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think one of the book bannings was like, you're making me read a Muslim book right after 9/11. Like, for real? Uh,
uh,
Shut up, for real. So yeah, I'm
mhm.
so glad books like this exist. And I'm sad that they're so relevant, but I'm also glad that there's the stories and we can learn from that some people can learn from it. I wish everyone else would.
Yeah,
And
right?
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
that's all the questions I have. Do you have anything to add?
Um, I'm very glad chose it, I probably would not have read it otherwise. I try and read as many banned books as possible, but I typically avoid books with this art style just because I normally don't like it. But I really appreciated this and the opportunity to read and discuss it and
Yeah.
to read it with like the lens that we would discuss it. So,
Yeah. I had been putting it off for so long, and that's kind of why I wanted us to read it and make me go ahead and read it. And
mhm.
I agree with you. The art style was one of the reasons why I was like, it's whatever. But again, I like the art and it fit the story, and I'm glad I read it. And I'm
Me
glad we
too.
so thank you for joining me on this journey. And
Yes.
next month,
Next month, I brought it home. Let me find it.
September, right? Oh my gosh. Tess picked our September book.
Did. The Hazards of Love by Stan Stanley.
Love that name.
Yes. It's a really fun shaped book, and the pages are black, so it's very unique. It's published by Oni Press, and we're big fans of them. Uh,
Yeah.
so September is National Hispanic Awareness Month, or maybe it's a week. And this
I
book
think
is
the 15th through the 15th. It's like in the
mhm,
middle.
it's in the middle, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
That's
So
what we're
we'll be
doing
there
next
then.
month.
Yeah, and hopefully you will be able to join us, right? To all the people watching this after the fact.
Yes. Well, thanks for joining. Thanks for discussing.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
I will see you later.
Later. Bye.
Bye.